session, its third year. We are so thrilled to have you. This is a part of the Sharing Science program of events. Please ask us more about that later because we're doing SciComm events all week long and beyond. We're so thrilled that people are involved in this because we feel that Upgoer is not only hilarious, but allows us to try to interact with our material and with what we're trying to say in an entirely novel and challenging way that is really at the heart of science, good science communication. Our first presenter today is Alexa Halford, who will be talking about angry birds in space.
Well, thanks. I think I'm done now. Yeah. Okay, so my name is not a simple word yet, because a company named after the second largest river named a thing that is the same as named as me, and I'm betting it will be soon. So I'm going to let myself use it. Hi, I'm Alexa, and I'm from the Flying in Space Company. Today, I'm going to tell you a story about some waves in space. This slide has too many large words. There, that's better. The Earth has a force field, a space house that we cannot see with our eyes. It keeps us safe from the sun's field and tiny things it throws at us. In this house, there are many different areas which can be in the same place but not touch. The different waves can be found in some of these different areas. The wave you are hearing now is named after birds singing when the sun comes up in the morning. Inside the Earth's space house, along with the waves, there are tiny, tiny things that fly around. Sometimes these tiny, tiny things can hurt the computers and people who also fly in space, as well as some on the ground and in the air. We want to better know how the number of the tiny, tiny things change, so we will be able to tell when it is safe in space and on the ground and in the air for our friends. The happy birds waves can move these tiny, tiny things around and into the very high sky where they are lost from the Earth's space house. But these happy bird waves only live outside of the cold area where there are many more tiny, slower things. When these waves move into the cold area, they are no longer so happy sounding and instead sound like angry birds.
June 11th, 1996. Hour 1, minute 44, hiss.
Sorry, he's not saying things in simple words.
The University of Iowa's Polar Plasma Wave Instrument. Wideband receiver, audio data.
Oh no, this slide has too many large words again. Okay. That's better. Our computer friends can imagine what the Earth's space house is like. We can put the happy bird waves outside of the cold area and see how they go. They often move all nice and together. And as they move up and down the field line, they sometimes move into the cold area and start dancing around, not really together anymore. By not moving nice and together, it makes them sound less like happy birds and more like angry birds, or so our computer friends imagine. We can see what is imagined by our computer friends if what is imagined by our computer friends is the same as the computers in space see. And again, with simple words, sorry, the Flying in Space Company likes longer words and needed to okay each slide. This is my first talk with the Flying in Space Company where they had to okay it. And so I didn't want them to only see the simple words and think that maybe I was simple too, and then wonder why they hired me and asked them to join the company. So now you get to see both. It might have been funny at first. Sorry, it's getting old now. We're almost done. Okay. And next page. On the top, we can see what the computers in space see, and on the bottom, we see what the computers on the ground imagined. Not all things look the same, but it's a good start. We need to learn more, and at every meeting, and every time we fly new computers in space and put them in the air and in places on the ground, we find cool new things. The next step is to then look at how the happy and how the angry bird waves push the tiny, tiny things around and either out of the Earth's space home and up into the high sky. If you are interested and don't mind longer words, I will be talking about where we see these tiny, tiny things lost to the high up sky 3 days from now. If you were here last year, you heard about our computers which flew with big bags of funny voice air and can see when the tiny, tiny things fall into the high up sky with the computers which flew with them. We look to see how the tiny things fall into the high up sky, inside or outside of the cold area. This gives us more information on if the tiny, tiny things fell because of the happy or the angry bird waves. Anyway, if we can have the computers imagine where the waves are and where the tiny, tiny things move, we can better say when it is safe for our friends in space and when there will be pretty lights in the night sky. So thank you for listening to my simple words about waves that sound like words in space. And thank you to Doctor Who works with pretty lights, long, long dead animal, and Doctor Who looks at tiny things flying out of the earth and rocks around other stars' air into the space for help finding these simple words.
Thank you so much for starting us off so well, Alexa. Our next invited speaker is Robin Bell, who will speak about when big ice turns into water, it matters for houses, stores, and schools all over.
Thank you. My name is a bird, not an angry bird. And a song that you might hear if you went near a church. I have no slides, so we're going to have to just do this listening to me. I work where it is very cold. In these cold places, close to the top of the world and the bottom of the world. Because it's cold at the top of the world and the bottom of the world, most of the water there has turned to ice. The ice there is very thick. I call it the big ice at the bottom of the world. Because it's the bottom of the world, most people think it does not matter. How could a big piece of ice so far away from my house and my school and my store down the street matter? The funny thing is that when the big ice turns back into water, it gets close to my house. It gets close to houses, schools, and stores, and things get wet all over the place. Just like here, in the town we are in. The world is getting warmer, and when the world gets warmer, the big ice will change, and it will change even faster. When the ice moves faster, more ice will leave the bottom of the world and come into my house. I work with many people trying to figure out how that big ice is changing. We want to know how the big ice will turn to water when the world warms and how much will get into my house. We know how fast the ice is changing by looking at things from space. Some people study the ice from water. Some people study it from space. When we look at the ice from space, we know the ice is moving faster, we know it's getting shorter, and we know there's less of it. 3 ways. It's hard to see the bottom of the ice from space, so I study the ice from the air. We fly over the ice so we can look at the top of the ice, inside and in the bottom. Sometimes we can see that the ice looks like many pieces of paper on top of each other. Sometimes the ice looks like a pile of leaves that fell off a tree. We look at the bottom of the ice to see if there's water under the ice. If there's water under the ice, sometimes the water acts like butter. When there is water like butter under the ice moves faster. When some of the water turns back. So sometimes the water turns back into the ice when the water gets cold. So we see that water turns back into ice can make funny things when we fly over it. Sometimes the water moves up under the ice. Water moving up is not down makes me think things are different. The thick ice is making the water move up, so where the ice is not so thick. Water likes to move to where the ice is not so fast, even if it has to move going up. In some places, there's so much water under the ice that we could all jump in, except it's too cold. We also worry about the water on top of the ice. How the water moves across the top of the ice is important. If the water stays in one place, it can get very deep. Very deep water is a place we can jump in. Very deep water can also break the ice into little pieces. If the ice breaks into little pieces, it'll get into my house, and the store, and the school. They'll all get wet. We saw a place last year where the water didn't get deep. We saw a place where the water moved to the edge of the ice and fell. It was very beautiful. The beautiful falling water might save the ice from falling into little pieces. It might save the ice from the bad, deep water. We're working to know whether or not it gets warm. When it gets warmer, will the water get deeper or fall off the edge of the ice? There's so much to learn about the ice on the top and the bottom of the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Who needs slides?
Who needs slides?
Not that they're bad. Our next presenter is Catherine McCammon, who will talk about tiny, tiny things with an amazing power.
So, the world is made of tiny, tiny things that have short names and join with another tiny, tiny thing to make new things. If we add breathing air to these new things, nothing happens. This is boring. But there's another one of these tiny, tiny things that is different. It has an amazing power. If we add breathing air, then we got lots of new things. This is exciting. But so what? Why should we care? Well, it gives something important that is needed for life and helps the world to work. But I am not allowed to say this word, so I will show it. So, breathing air is important for life and the world. But you already knew that, I think. But did you know that breathing air has not always been in our world? When our world started, it may have looked like this. There was not much breathing air at all. And the thing with the amazing power could not make new things with breathing air, so it made this instead. This comes from bad smell air, and we think there was a lot of it around when the world started. So we wanted to study the word I am not allowed to say. We wanted to study this when there is no breathing air around. So to do this, we got a box that had no breathing air. And then we got lots of bottles and filled them with water, as well as the thing with the amazing power and the thing from the bad smell air. And then we added tiny bits of breathing air stuff to some of the bottles and waited and watched to see what happened. So how did we know if anything was happening? Well, we used a thing that makes upside-down forms. If the forms change, then we know that our things changed. In the beginning, this is what the upside-down form of the things looked like. Then we added a little bit of breathing air stuff and waited for 5 months. This is what we saw. Just a little bit of the word that I'm not allowed to say. Then we looked at the bottle with a little bit of breathing air stuff that was dried in the box, and we saw this. This is a big change and gives a lot of the word that I can't say. So we can learn more about what happened by looking at the upside-down forms, and we are still working on this. So what does this mean for the start of our world? That's a good question. Please come back next year to find out.
Our next speaker is Charles Linneman, who will talk about taking a lot of pictures of real things and making them into a single picture you can move on a computer.
Hello, I'm Charles, and I will be telling you about taking a lot of pictures of real things and making them into one piece on a computer. I worked in the biggest state with the people who care for the best parks owned by all of us. My job was to take a lot of pictures of real things, both small and large, and make them into one piece on a computer into pictures that can be moved and turned and can easily be shared across any distance at any time. These pictures are as close to the real thing as possible, so they have many uses. We're talking about small things like rocks or dead animal parts that have been turned into rock, and very big things with pictures taken from the air. There are many uses for small things, and I'm going to tell you how they are made. Every time this stops, a picture is taken. Same here, except this time the wood rock has been moved. With this, you get trails of pictures all the way around the wood rock or any small thing. This is what it looks like on a computer with all the pictures taken. So many trails that you can barely see all of them. This is what it looks like when it's done. You don't need to read all the words in each box, but this is the most simple plan for doing this. And this is all the things that you need to do. There are a lot more steps than many people think. The really big ones are also very cool, and they're very fun to make. When the flying car gets to a planned place in the air, a computer on the flying car tells the picture box to take a picture. Each picture is made up of really tiny color boxes, and what you can put all the smaller pictures together to get one bigger picture that looks like you can see it from higher than any of the smaller pictures. Because each picture is made out of tiny color boxes, a computer can tell you how high each point is. Red is high, blue is low. Even cooler, you can look at how the big block of ice is breaking. This is how using pictures looks next to light returns on a big block of ice moving slowly towards water. The picture in the middle looks bad because the pictures were taken from really high up in the air. The picture on the left is as close to real life as my arm is long. And the picture from this year using pictures is as close to real life as my hand is long. This way of using pictures in the parks of the big estate should continue to be used as light returns use a lot of money. They use money like a flying car uses gas, and pictures use much less money. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next speaker is our invited speaker, Kimberley Wood, who will talk about how changes in top water bother big turning packs of upgoing wet air.
Thank you. Today I'd like to talk about how changes in top water bother big turning packs of upgoing wet air. This picture shows you a beautiful case of one of these big turning packs. This was the strongest pack ever seen in this area. You could say a picture is worth 1,000 words, or as good as, oops. So this picture shows what the top water is. The top water gives power to the air above it, like a big turning pack, and the power gets bigger as the top water gets hotter. Big turning packs of upgoing wet air like hot water. Top water changes from place to place. On the left and right side of the land, you can see the top water is different. Note that all the top water hotter than this line is good for these packs. All of the top water colder than this line is not good for them. So the fact that, oops, since top water gets warmer less fast up here compared to over here, this is important for what the packs do in these places. This picture shows where big turning packs have been in the past. Spots with warmer colors mean stronger packs. Spots with colder colors mean less strong packs. Note that on the left side, they don't get up as far. This is important. But over here, the spots get a lot farther. They get a lot closer to where people live. This shows, here is a case of a pack running into cold top water. The blue line is how strong the pack is, or sorry, the red line is how strong the pack is, and the blue line is the heat of the top water. When the top water gets below this line, it loses power really fast. That black line is the same as the black line on the previous picture. So the pack lost power when it moved into this area with the cold colors. It's good to look at these cases in the past, but what we really want to know is how fast these cases will lose power ahead of time. Remember, a lot of these packs get close to or hit land. We want to tell people what they need to do before the pack gets to them, especially if that pack is really strong. That means we have to know what we'll do ahead of time. Over the years, we've gotten better at this, but not very quickly, as shown by this red line being almost straight across. The bars show how wrong we usually are, and the spots show how wrong we are when they get weak really fast. So when a pack breaks down really fast in 24 hours, we're usually more wrong about what it will do. A lot of people look at how packs get strong really fast, but fewer people look at how they break down really fast. I'm one of them. So let's see what we can learn about these fast breakdown cases over big bodies of water. The black spots show where these packs started breaking down. The packs had to be far enough away from land for the top water to matter the most. Land also makes these packs break down really fast, but I wanted to look only at the top water. The fast breakdowns are more packed over areas where the top water gets cold really fast on the left side of the land. This looks a lot like the picture of where packs go on the left side versus the right side. Also, there's a lot more spots on the left side. So how fast the top water gets cold really matters in this area. There's a lot of stuff on this slide. I will walk you through it. The top two boxes are all for fast breakdowns that was on the right side of the land. The bottom two boxes are for all those on the left side of the land. The lines show how hot the top water is, and the colors show how wet the air is. So Hotter colors, less wet air. The top water gives power, but the air needs to be wet for the air to keep going up. So on both sides of the land, the lines show that it changes really fast, and that's what bothers the packs. But how wet the air is also matters. Knowing how fast the top water changes ahead of the pack should help us better know what the pack will do before it happens. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Benjamin Brown Steiner, who will discuss to know or not to know.
Hello, my name is Ben Brown Steiner, and I'm an emissions scientist, a dirty air thinker at Atmospheric and Environmental Research, an air and world thinking place, and I also do not have light pictures to show. So, let us pretend that we know something, that the air is getting warmer, that there is a lot of building blocks in the air, and that one type of these building blocks, one that we imagine as 3 small O's that are stuck together, hurt us when we breathe, and hurt other things by eating away at them bit by bit. Or that a fire makes smoke, and that smoke is bad to breathe, and that this smoke is made up of many different types of building blocks that dance and slam and break apart and combine with each other and make new building blocks and change themselves in our air and our sky. There are many things that we know like this. And let us pretend that we know these things really well. We are pretty sure about these things. That is great, but we want to know more. We want to know these things even better. We want to learn. One way to do this is to think really hard about the things that we know and what we think we know about these things, and then do something new with this thing. We touch it, we set it on fire, we join it with other things. We sometimes even make a computer pretend to be the world that we think we know, and we watch what happens in this computer pretend world when we ask, what if this? Or what if that? Or how about this? Or what happens when? Sometimes, a lot of the time, this will let us learn many new things. Learning by focusing on what we already know usually works pretty well. But our air and our sky and all of these building blocks are so confusing. There is so much happening when these building blocks keep hitting each other and changing each other all the time that sometimes this way of learning does not let us learn new things. But there is another way of learning. We can think really hard about the ways in which we do not know things. Instead of starting by being sure, we are starting by being not sure. And so we ask, how are we not sure? Are we not sure because we have not looked hard enough? Do we know only 1 or 2 things? And how many more things do we think there are to learn? Are we not sure because this thing is so new and so strange that we have not yet been able to learn and everything there is to know about it yet? Are we not sure because what we do know, we do not know very well? Maybe we are not sure because what we think we know, we do not actually know. How would we know if we were wrong or when we were right? Are we sure we did not do something wrong when we learned that thing that we think we know? Did something trip us up? Did we miss something? Or did we forget something? I learn about our air and sky by looking at the different ways we learn new things, and there is a lot that can be learned in this way. I have learned that sometimes there are simple ways of learning. These are usually easy and fast. And sometimes there are hard and confusing ways of learning. These are usually slow and take a lot of work. And sometimes there are middle ways of learning that are sort of easy and sort of hard, or sort of hard and sort of slow. Is one way of learning better than the other? It really matters on what question you ask and how you ask it. Are all of these ways of learning the same? Sometimes they are, and sometimes they are not. And what can we learn from the parts of these ways of learning that are different? We can actually learn a lot. I learned that the fast and easy way of learning things about our air and our sky and all these little building blocks is as good as the slow and hard way of learning things, except when there are many trees on the ground, or sometimes on the coldest days of the year, and sometimes at night. I learned about how long we have to look at these building blocks in the air and the sky to be sure that things have changed over time. 1 day is not enough to know. 1 year is not enough to know. 5 or 10 or maybe even 20 years is usually enough to know. This is how I learn, by studying the ways in which we are not sure about things, and I think you can learn this way too.
Our next speaker is Debjani Sihi, who will talk about how do trees and the small life forms under the ground talk to each other and other outside things.
Hi, so I will talk the things which are happening on the land. So what we know about the land? We have trees above the ground, and we have small life forms below the ground. And I study how these trees above the ground and the small life forms below the ground talk to each other. And if they can make our world hot or cool. So what exactly that mean? So we know that these trees can take a type of hot-keeping air from the with the help of sunlight, rain, and water below the ground, and make that as food, which becomes the building block of these trees. So these green parts of these trees sometimes fall, and they also die, and this green part becomes the brown part. Then what happens? So we have different kinds of small life forms below the ground, which can eat those dyed brown parts of the trees. And then they can log those building blocks beneath the ground for a long, long time. But the small life forms beneath the ground and the trees above the ground also breathe like we human breathe, and they can return some of those hot-keeping air above the ground. But remember, there are many different kinds of the small life forms beneath the ground. And we have different kinds of hot-keeping air above the ground. This is another kind. This is the third kind. And all these kinds of small life forms can make this hot air. But they can also take up some of those hot-keeping air. Okay, so you know that we have different kinds of hot-keeping air above the ground. So why these are hot-keeping air? They usually cause problem to return some of the sunlight far from the ground. So that happens with the help of how hot our air or ground is and how much water we have beneath the ground or above the ground. Let's pretend that we have a lot of this hot-keeping air coming out beneath the ground and from trees, but less of them are taken up. So we are making this hot-keeping air even more. That can make our world hot. So now pretend this small life forms and trees can take up a lot of this hot-keeping air. And they return a very little, a very small amount of this hot-keeping air. So then what happens? They can make our world cool. So if you want to learn more about it, I will talk more about all those kinds of things using the words that I'm not allowed to say today. So please come to see me. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Our next speaker is Louise Kellogg.
Hi, I'm Louise, And my last name, most people think means the people who make the stuff you eat in the morning. And I work at one of the colleges in the state that's on the left of this land when you're looking at a picture of the world. And I'm going to talk about where inside the world is the stuff that makes the wood things we write with, and the small pretty rocks that women wear on their fingers, and where does this stuff go over time. So we have the middle of the world. There we go, okay. Here's a picture of the middle of the world, and the middle of the world that we live on, between the top and the bottom, and the top and the heart, is made of green rock. When that rock gets hot, the rock runs slowly like thick water. And the hot rock moves up, and the cold rock moves down, but it is still rock. This makes the rock on the top of our world move around, and it cools the inside of our world. We cannot see the middle of the world with our own eyes, so we make pretend worlds on a computer. Okay. We also use a lot of the tiny bits that are hard to find to smell where the rock comes from and where it has been and how long it takes to move around. One of the tiny bits that we use is the kind of stuff that makes living things and makes the wood things that we write with and makes the small pretty rocks that women wear on their fingers. That's pretty long to say, to explain and name this stuff, so I will just call it the small things in rings. When it is in our air, the small things in rings make the air and the water warm. So how many of the tiny bits that are in the wood things that we write with and the small pretty rocks that are in rings are in the middle and in the heart of our world? A lot of it is there, much more than is now in the air or the water. So this picture has a box for each important place in our world. Okay, let me try this. The boxes are big if they have a lot of the small things in rings, and they're small if they have a little of the small things in rings. The color of the box tells you what it is. Red is the heart of our world. This color, the color that I cannot name, is the middle. Brown is the rock at the top of our world. Dark blue is the big water. Green is the living things and the things that used to be living. And light blue is the air. Most of the small things in rings are in the heart of our world. 10 times less than that is in the middle of our world. 10 times less than that is in the rock that's at the surface. The big water has 100 times less of the small things in rings than the rock at the top of the world. And even less of this stuff is in the living things, and even less in the air. Okay. On another world, the world closer to the sun that is named for a beautiful woman, the air has a lot of the tiny bits that make the wood things we write with and the small pretty rocks. The air on this world named for the pretty woman is very heavy, and it is very hot there. No one could live on the beautiful woman world. What if our world was like this other world when it was young? And this picture of the beautiful women is from my favorite book for children about these stories. So, if our world had a lot of air with a lot of the small things in rings, that young air went somewhere else before life started. I want to know where it went and how long it took to leave the air. On our world, the air and the rock work together. The water, the air, and the rock work together to make different kinds of rock, like this, that has a lot of the small things in rings. We can see these kinds of rocks on land today. This made our air very light and made our world a place where people and other living things can live. So, some of that rock that may have gone into the middle of the world. Where two hard parts at the top of the world meet, rocks will move down into the middle of the world. Some of it will come back up later when the rock comes up. To see what happened, I make a pretend world on a computer. This is like a game. I play the game to see if I can make it look like our world. If I do not start the game well, the world does not look right. Here are two of the games. The air starts heavy, and gets light as the rocks grow on the top of the world. Some of the small things and rings go into the middle of the world, and some comes out of the middle of the world to the air. In this game, the middle of the world gets more of the small things and rings. In this other game, the middle of the world stays the same. Because these games do not look just like our world, I will keep playing. and I will talk about this using many big words in 2 hours. We learned that what goes down must mostly come up, and what goes up must go back down. Thank you.
But we're going to move on to our next speaker, Monica Peltz, who will talk about the nice people who live up in the cold place above you, put lots of money into sense things to look into the big deep water and see weird-ass things.
Hello, my name is Monica, and I am from the nice place. It's cold, but it's nice, and I've made you a video. So we are the nice people who live in the cold place, and we present this short show. We put lots of money into sense things to see the big deep water, and we see some weird-ass things. This is a picture of my house from very far away, right there. You can see that we like to look in all the big water around my house. This, we hope, will make it so that we know more about the big waters. Now, at the start, looking at the big deep water was really hard. So we thought, let's get some cool guys together to put their playthings in the water so we can all look at the same time. This was a new idea, but they helped us anyway. They thought this might be a good way to get answers about the big deep water. This is actually really good thinking because the big deep water can be quite mean, and people don't like it when it's being mean. When it's mean like this, it makes us not want to live anymore, and it's hard to get answers. At the bottom of the big deep water, we put some power roads to move power to lots of different sense things. These roads are like the ones you have in your house but bigger, and we stick them in the same way you would. Eventually. Using power roads means we can use things like looking lights and listening sticks. Ooh. They let us hear what is going on in the big deep water. We sometimes also use underwater cars. This is a really cool underwater car because it's being driven by a man really far away. But the best part of looking is all the weird-ass things, like this. And this. This one's going away. We don't know why. We see lots of these. This one is a bit like a body part. We call it Big Red, which is maybe not better. The next one is a deep water maybe hurts, because some of its family is known for having a point at the end of its butt that might hurt us. A guy lots of people know from TV died once, but this one's not like it. We're not sure which one of these has a weird front or a weird ass. This one we know the weird front is at the top because sometimes it eats the ground, so the weird ass is the other end. Sometimes we see things that we don't know what they are. Usually, if they don't like us, they just leave. But sometimes, the mean ones get mad and tell us. A lot. This one was funny too. He got round air stuck on him, and it makes him go up when he doesn't want to. Whee! But we don't just look at weird-ass things. We also look at the ground too. Where my house is, we think that some pretty big shaking will come soon. By looking at the ground, we hope to know if the shaking will happen with some notice. A notice would be nice, because then we can get out of the way and take our good stuff with us. also look at ice. This is important because the ice is leaving. We hope to learn how to stop it from leaving. But if we can't do that, at least we can take some nice pictures before it goes. The best part is the last part, though. We share all of our looking and listening and even our numbers with anyone who wants it. You can be like this guy and see it all at once, or this guy and use just a bit at a time. We really like it when people use our sense things to help answer their own questions about the big deep water, and we make it free to do this. So please, come visit us. If you have a computer, you can look too.
Our next speaker is Paul Byrne, who will talk about what happens where the water and the rock touch in small space bodies.
Thank you. Good day, women and men. I'm going to talk at you about some of the work my friends and I have done to try and figure out basically what's going on in these interesting ice small bodies that go around big bodies in the whole set of things that go around the sun. And the reason these things are interesting, and they're really interesting, is because it's possible that under the outside bit that we can see, which is made of ice, there could be a big water. And if there's a big water, it could be that there's life. Now, we don't know that, but it's a good place to go look for life that isn't on this world. So that's basically the idea of what we're trying to figure out. The problem is we can only see the outside bit, which means we don't know what's happening in the inside. So it could be that maybe there's a little bit of ice and there's a big water, and then there's the rock middle below that, or maybe there's a lot of ice and then some amount of big water, and then the rock. We don't know is the point, because it's very difficult to get a little car in the water looking at the ground. It's very far away and it costs much money. So we're trying to understand, using good thinking, to try and work out with numbers what might be going on down there. But the reason this is important is because anywhere on our world where rock and water touch, the rock and the water change and they give each other things and they make new kinds of air, and it's possible that some life eats that new air. And if that could be happening on our world, it could also potentially be happening here. So what we're trying to work out is what's happening where the rock and the water touch inside these small ice bodies. So we figured this out. I'm going to share with you two of these worlds we looked at. This is small ice world number 1, and we basically tried to figure out what was happening inside. So we take one of these. It's relatively small. The top, right down to the middle, is as far as you would go in a car in a few hours. It's not very big. And then we use some good guesses to try and imagine what's happening inside. So there's the ice, there's the big water, and then there's the rock. Okay, they're the numbers we use. And then we can use some thinking with some numbers to figure out, first off, a few things. What is the force that makes things fall? And that force goes up for a bit, and then where the water hits the rock, that force starts to go down. So we take that number, and then we combine that with numbers we use to work out how heavy the things on top are, overburden pressure. And then with those values, and then by figuring out how heavy the things on top are, then we can use that number together to try and work out how much gaps there are inside the rock. And this is important because on our world, anytime rock has gaps and spaces in it, water or air goes in there. Water under the big water on this world, and probably water here too. So we then take get good guesses for how much gap there is or where the water is touching the rock. We use those other numbers, and then we can say how much space there is in the rock at the very middle. And even if we use only a little bit of gap at the top, there's still a gap at the very middle. If we use a higher amount of gap at the surface, there's still gaps in the middle. Because gaps are filled with water on our world, where there is rock and water touching, it's very likely, it's true, that there's going to be water all the way through the middle of the rock on this small ice world. And that's interesting, because where the water and the rock are touching, you may have things that make life that life can eat. Then finally, we can make this thing that figures out how much force you would need to break the rock. And it turns out the word fault is totally a word I can use here. So there are normal faults on this thing. Then there's also the other kind of fault, which is shown in that other color on that picture. And the idea is that we don't know that there are breaks in the rock here. We don't know that, but in the later part of this same thinking, we are going to be able to tell if there are forces, whether or not there are cracks in the rock. And if there are cracks in the rock, this is important because hot rock comes up through cracks in rock, and water goes down in cracks in rock. So understanding if these faults are here is important. We just don't know the answers yet, but we have a way to go and answer that question. So we took a bigger world. This is a bigger small ice world. It would take you many hours in your car to drive from the middle to the surface. And then we get good guesses for what's inside. We have the ice, the water layer, and then we've got the rocky middle. And we can do the same thing again to work out where there would be faults if there are forces available. Again, this is a way we have of making good guesses as what the rock is doing down here. We don't know that this is true, but if we do find other information later in our thinking, we'll be able to put that information into this picture and work out if there are faults there. And this is important because we can take this idea for all the small icy worlds. And some of these small ice worlds are not small. This one, whose name I cannot say, is so big, it's also got this weird inside, where there's lots of water and ice touching each other like this. And even then, the rock middle of this is bigger than the big rock that goes around our world that we all know. And that big rock that goes around our world that we all know has lots of breakings and rocks hitting other rocks, making big holes. And it's got hot rock coming on the surface. There's one of these lying inside this big ice world here that goes around the really big world in our damn it, solar system. And so this is a rocky world that we need to consider, and this is important. But here are some final thinkings I will leave on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Michelle Hall, will talk about young idea people mixed with old idea people to make the world better.
So, good afternoon, and I work with groups of young idea people who together get together in cool places once a month to learn about cool things from older idea people. So we have fun, cool learning places. We eat and drink and talk and play to help us learn. We have fun thinking about and fixing crazy problems and some serious problems. At these cool places, the young and the old build things, and they talk about ideas that may come to be one day. We do stuff to figure out what happens when you change just one thing and end up making something new. The ideas we talk about may help fix our body or our mind, make a car move without help from people, clean things up like our air, water, and rock and ice in the world. The young idea people want to learn how to get jobs like the older idea people. So they listen and they learn and they work to become the brightest idea people. The young idea people oftentimes scare the old idea people because they have a different view of the world. They have different ideas, and they see the world differently. Sometimes the young idea people have good ideas that the old idea people have not thought about. When this happens, it makes the old idea people excited and happy because it gives them, the old idea people, new ideas about how to better their work. The old idea people get to go to places all around the world to share their ideas. They make good money and they have fun lives. They write about their work and they can be well known or not. Sometimes the old idea people talk too much and they don't listen. They use big words and they can be hard to understand. But the young idea people help them learn to use known words so everyone understands. We know that young people learn from helping older idea people improve their ideas. We also find that the old idea people are happy that the young idea people are so bright and work hard. As young and older idea people build things together, their hard work will make us all better off. Every day there will be many more young idea people that can help change the world, making more food, clean water and air, and less sick people. All around the world, the people will be happy and safe because the old idea people took the time to help the young idea people learn. This shows where young idea people have fun with old idea people. Maybe you want to share your ideas with young idea people and in a place nearby. If so, talk to me after this session or on Wednesday. Yeah, that's in the days. 2 days from now. And what we've learned is that in this cool place, the young idea people begin to try out new ideas. They change their mind about things. They talk about new ideas with their friends and others, they begin to think old idea people are actually cool. They learn to work with others, and they help old idea people share their work. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Anant M, who will ask, how big are different parts of pictures of the rock under us?
All right, good afternoon. So I'm going to tell you about how we can learn more about our world by looking at pictures of rock inside it, and how we can find out and learn from how big different parts of these pictures are. So when the ground shakes, we can use waves it causes to take pictures of rock under us, since those waves pass through rock in different ways. These pictures can tell us a lot about how our world works and help us learn a lot about rock. The picture you see is one of these pictures of rock within the world, and has been used to help understand why a lot of what we see around us looks the way it does. But where do these pictures come from? When waves from the ground shaking move through rock, some of them are faster than others. Picking that change up is what lets us make these pictures. But since the ground shakes differently, different places pick up different waves, and different waves feel and tell us different things, which can mean that the pictures we make with them can look quite different. Here's one kind of picture of the world, far under us. What you see is how fast a wave from the ground shaking moves to the world. The spots that look warm are places where a wave moves slower, and this means they might be warm spots in real life if we can learn more about them. This picture was made with just one type of wave from the ground shaking. Here's a different picture of the same place under us. This picture isn't different because it's wrong. The waves it uses just feel different parts of our world, and the picture might have been put together with a different way. It also uses different sorts of waves. Now here's a different picture of a much smaller place under us, a place where some of us might be from. This picture is different because it was only made of one place, with waves moving through the ground in that place, instead of the whole world. Now this lets us make more correct pictures about a single place, but doesn't really tell us whether what we see here works with the rest of the world. So how do we learn from all these different pictures of the same place? All these pictures have signs of things that happen deep within our world. Different things that happen to different pieces of rock show up in clear ways in these pictures. The fact that parts of a picture are long may mean something going on in the rock that's very different than if there were lots of short pieces in the picture. Now, since pictures of smaller parts of the world use different waves, they might pick up different things than pictures of the whole world do. So this means we need to look at pictures of smaller parts of the world together with pictures of the whole world to better understand how rock in our world works. Now, to learn from and look at large and small pictures together, we need to pull pictures into pieces using different building blocks, which end up being kinds of waves that repeat. But since pictures of the whole world are much bigger than pictures of smaller parts of the world, we need to use different building blocks for each picture. And this makes it hard to look at large and small pictures together, and this has been a problem for many, many years. But here's a new kind of building block. Instead of using a building block that keeps on repeating, we use one that stops repeating after a little while. Since this building block, which we'll call a little wave, is small and doesn't repeat, it lets us look at any part of a picture of the world, no matter how big or small the full picture might be. So we can use our new building blocks to break pictures that are big and pictures that are small into their pieces. Here we do that for a picture of the whole world. The first picture you see is the entire part of the picture we're interested in. The second is only the long parts of the picture, and the third is the short parts of the picture. Most of the parts of this picture are quite long. The long parts look like the whole picture. But we can also do that for a picture of just a small part of the whole world. We see the other side here. There are both long and short parts in this picture, but the short parts are really strong. They look like the whole picture. And now we can put together what we learned from the large building blocks from the large picture of the whole world with the small new building blocks from the small picture of just a part of the world. And this gives us a picture that is made with waves that have felt many things and can tell us a lot more about the rock under us. So as we can see, waves tell us a lot about what's under us, but the pictures that they make can be a lot better if we use little waves to break different big and small pictures into their building blocks and put parts of these pictures back together over one part of the world. This lets us see what many different waves have seen and not just those that one person used to make a picture. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Elizabeth Alty, who will speak of little ice bodies, huge ice lands, and the upgoing of the big water body.
Okay, hello. First, some words. This is a little ice body on the left. This is a huge ice land, the one closest to us, in the middle. And this is the big water body, the blue thing, all the way on the right. There are lots of pretty big water bodies, so you might be confused, but I call this one the big one because it goes all the way around the world. So this is the big water body. So maybe you already know that ice is just very cold water. Maybe you have watched ice turn into water very slowly in a glass that you were drinking out of. If you added more ice to the glass, there would be more water once it eventually warmed up, right? And if you put the water from your glass in a cold place, you could make more ice. You could store some water for later if you wanted to. So the huge ice lands have that kind of relationship with the big water body. That relationship might not be that obvious, but I can explain. Something that many people don't know about the huge ice lands is that the ice up there moves. It's true. The force that pulls us all down also makes ice move. The sky throws baby ice on top of the huge ice lands. And because of the force pulling us all down, it eventually makes its way out to the big water body. When there's more ice going out than baby ice coming in, the huge ice lands get smaller and the big water body goes up. Think about this like you with your glass of water, adding more ice and forgetting to put the water back in the cold place for later. This is what is happening right now with the huge ice lands, and we think the big water body will be going up for many years to come. So, because people live near the big water body, we would like to know how fast it can go up. To know how fast the big water body can go up, it helps to know how quickly ice will come out of the huge ice lands and end up as water in the big water body. We use computers to figure that out. So this picture shows you that ice might come out pretty fast or not that fast. Many bright people have spent many years telling computers how ice moves so that the computers can help us understand what might happen to the ice over time. These people told the computer about the huge ice land closest to us, and then they asked the computer how fast it thought the ice was moving. This picture shows you that. The colors on the left show you the right answer we saw on space pictures, and the color on the right shows you what the computer thought. It's pretty close, but things are still hard to get just right. I should probably tell you that when ice moves to the edge of the huge ice lands, it doesn't just slip over the side and turn into water right there. Where the huge ice lands meet the big water body, the ice can break off in blocks. What's more, there are many ways the breaking can be different for different places. So if you think about the huge ice land farther away from us, there are large areas where there's really only ice and water around, no rock or anything crazy. It's also really cold. So there they have blocks of ice as big as states blocking off, but not that often. Now, if you think about the huge ice land closer to us, it's a little bit warmer. There are rocks around the edges, and when ice is moving past rocks that aren't moving, it acts different. Actually, around the edges of the closer huge ice land, it is more like the ice is moving through a whole lot of little ice bodies. So if we're wondering about the upgoing of the big water body, we should know how ice moves through the little ice bodies to reach the water. So it's especially hard to tell the computer about little ice bodies that move ice out of the huge ice land closest to us, because the interesting parts of the little ice bodies are smaller than the areas the computer usually likes to tell us about. And when we ask too many questions or tell the computer too many little things, that gets to be a lot to keep track of. And sometimes the computer gets angry and makes us wait and wait and wait before it will tell us anything. So my work is to tell the computer about little ice bodies in a way that it can understand quickly. Happy computer. I made some new number expressions to explain what happens when there's both broken ice and not broken ice in the same place, like close to the end of a little ice body. So when I give the computer those number expressions, it can tell me whether the little ice body is getting bigger or smaller over time. It looks like this. The gray thing is the little ice body, and you can't see it happening here, but ice is breaking off the end and then immediately going away. And over the years you see in these pictures, you can see that the little ice body is getting smaller. It will run until past now, so I'm going to move on. But you see that it gets smaller. And there are 200 little ice bodies like this all around the huge ice land closest to us. And with my new number expressions, we're studying their changes. The computer is helping us find out how fast the fastest little ice bodies can lose ice to the big water body. This offers us another way of understanding how fast the huge ice land can lose its ice, because the ice has to go through little ice bodies before it gets to the big water. Once we know that, we'll have a better idea how much upgoing of the big water is possible. If you're very interested in this, you can watch me talk about it using more words later this week. Thank you so much for listening.
Our next speaker is Angela Reusch, talking about shake warning, helping people stay safe with lots of small boxes in the ground to warn them about strong shaking.
Hi. Most people would call me by a different name of a little animal, but we'll go with that as is. Okay, so if you knew that something bad was going to happen, let's say maybe you had 10 seconds, or maybe many tens of seconds, what would you do? Would you stop? Would you face and book? Would you make your words like little flying animals? Or as the one person said, would you take your good stuff and run away with it? But we don't know when big shaking is coming, so what does it matter? What can we do about it? We have a plan. I have friends. I have a team of friends, a group of people I work with at schools where old kids take classes. We've made a team with people who are in control of making pictures of the state of rocks in the ground and water on our land. And we ask for, and sometimes get, money from other people the ones who try to run our country or our state. And sometimes we get lucky, and people who have a lot of money give us some of their money. But what do we do with this money? Well, we want people to be safe, and so we have a plan. The plan is to put many boxes, shown by the little round cups here, all over the ground. And this is in the land where the sun sets, in the direction where normally we would be having this talk. And above that, we put many of these boxes in the ground, and when big shaking happens towards the left, as the shaking goes across the ground towards maybe the people in the towns, these little boxes, they will pick up on the shaking, and then they will go and they will send messages to big computers, and they will think about these computers will think, and they will say, was it a faraway ground shake? Maybe I don't care about that. Was it a small but close ground shake? Or is it shaking that people wanted to make? Sometimes they do that. What if it was the big shake? Our hope, our plan is that when this big shake comes, we can give the people in those towns the warning. Maybe 5 seconds, maybe more. But what? What good is a warning? What can we do? In big shaking before, as in these pictures show, a lot of the bad things that happen to people come when they run or when they fall. And these are things that maybe we could help them with. Very good. Drop, cover, and hold on are all good words. Things that people can do to help themselves and their little kids. But there's more. Other things we can do. People can come down from high places and not fall down. A doctor can move a pointy thing away from places where you do not want pointy things to go. We can ask cars that fly to stay on the ground or stay in the air. Maybe go to a different place that day. Tell people whose job that they help with scary stuff. We can tell them sooner so they can help sooner. Lots of good things. There's also other things we can do. A computer can pass a note that starts stuff happening that doesn't even need people to take action. We could make the boxes that move up and down in homes and stores, they can stop on the next floor and open so that people do not get stuck in the boxes. We can open the doors that the cars that fight fires live behind those doors so they can get out to help and not get stuck with the door brakes from the shaking. We can also shut off water and air that warms homes and is used for making food hot, turn that off so bad things do not happen. We could also have faster alarms that when big scary water waves come over land, we can tell people sooner because those waves are scary. But we need more boxes. The blue this picture shows where we have some boxes, although some of these boxes need to be faster. They need to talk faster to the big computers. The color of the sun spots there are where there are no boxes and we need more boxes. But we need more money, we need more people, and we need for all of this to come together so that we can help people when the big shaking comes.
Our next speaker is Catherine Armstrong, who will ask, how did the ball of rock we live on get so nice?
So that's where I work, and the people, my friends who helped me with this, and the people who gave me money to try and figure out, or help figuring out at least why the ball of rock we live on got so nice, because we still don't really know how it got that way with all that nice air and water and stuff that we like to breathe and drink. So a big part of what makes our world so nice is what it's made out of, and our world is made out of rocks, and a lot of it is made out of that stuff that's really hard and dense and shiny, and it turns red if you leave it outside and it gets wet. Most of that stuff is way down deep in the middle of our world, and so we don't really see it. But there's some in the rocks too. And that turning red stuff is kind of interesting because it likes to team up with the kind of air that we like to breathe, and it'll team up with the kind of air we like to breathe in different ways. It can team up with none at all, and that's how it is when it's down deep in the center of our world. There's no breathing air there. Well, maybe there's some. We can argue about that later. It can team up with where there's one little piece of the turning red stuff and one little piece of the breathing air, or there's two pieces of the red stuff and three pieces of the breathing air, and so on and so on. We don't really worry about more of those, but that's what makes it turn red, by the way. So, the problem we don't understand that I tried to work on is that actually in the rocks, there's more breathing air than makes sense. So when there's the turning red stuff around with no breathing air in it, it'll take the breathing air from the turning red stuff that has more than one, and they trade, and they're kind of socialist about it. I probably can't say that word. Sorry. So in the rocks that we see up here, though, there's lots of the turning red stuff that have three or more of the breathing air. So that doesn't make a lot of sense, because at one point, that turning red stuff that's down in the bottom was all mixed up with everything, so they should have shared it, and there should be less of the breathing air attached to the turning red stuff. So we wondered, though, because where I work, we have a lot of these really big things that push stuff together really hard so that we can make it like it is way down deep in the earth. And so I put little pieces of stuff, and in fact, there's me sitting on one of these machines, and it's so big I have to climb up and sit on it, and then it puts it all together and it squishes really hard. And so we wondered that maybe if we squish it really hard, we can force more of the breathing air to team up with the turning red stuff than it really wants to. So what did I find? It did. So when I squished harder, and don't worry about the bit at the front there where it kind of goes down at first. That's a different thing. But when you squished enough, it started to go back up again. So maybe, we're not sure yet. There's still a few things to be sure, but maybe if the really hot rocks were deep down enough, maybe we can explain why there's more breathing air than in the rocks today. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jacob Hagedorn, who will talk about food and stuff.
Hello. I am Jake. This is Food and Stuff. I study how we grow food. It takes many things to grow our food. We need the sun, air, ground, and water. To grow food for lots of people, we use more than this. We also use added stuff. We add this stuff to make food grow faster and stronger. The problem is that too much of this added stuff can eventually hurt our air, ground, and water. I work with people who grow food on large fields here. A long time ago, much of this land was covered in water, so people made long lines in the ground around 4 to 6 feet deep. The water would go from the field into the lines, and they would move out to the large body of water around the state. Our field grows 2 important foods. One year, we grow one. The other year, we grow the other. These are lines in our field, where the water goes from the field and then moves out to the large body of water. Here's a picture of a line with a lot of field water. These lines are good because they keep added stuff from leaving the field. We call this the best way of doing things. How do we do it? At the end of each line is a box with a block that can stop water from leaving the line. A person can raise or lower the block to change how much water is in the line. If a block is low, the water can go out quickly and easily, but added stuff can go out too. Too much added stuff in the water can make water bad for animals and people. With the block up high, the water has to slow down. This means there's more water in the field where the food grows. But with more water in the ground, the added stuff can change from ground stuff to air stuff. The big question is, are we fixing one problem by stopping added stuff from going into the water, but making another problem by letting added stuff go into the air? To know these things, I have 2 fields. In one field, the water and added stuff leave the field quickly, and in the other field, water and added stuff leave slowly. I have 32 points of learning in the fields. I want to know 4 things. So I go into the field, and I use a round box to catch the air from the field to learn about the added stuff in the air. I take small pieces of the ground to learn about water in the ground and added stuff in the ground. I take small cups of water from the lines to learn about the added stuff in the water lines. Here's what I've learned so far. For air type 1, I found there were 2 times with more air stuff coming off the fields, and those were near the times when people added stuff to the fields. However, this was almost the same for the fields with and without water. For air type 2, I found that sometimes it is difficult to tell what is going on. For stuff in the ground, I found there were 2 times with more added stuff in the ground, just like air type 1. For the water in the ground, I found that sometimes the field uses the best way of doing things. The field that uses the best way of doing things has more water at the top, but not all the time. For added stuff in the line water, I found when it is cold, there's a lot of added stuff in the water. When it is warm, the added stuff is not found there. Cold, warm, cold, warm. The red, the fields with less water, had more added stuff in the field with more water at most times. There are still more things to do. Another year of study will be good to have. A different type of food might change how added stuff leaves the field in either air or water. I will keep working with the people who grow food and with my friends at school to learn more. Knowing how much added stuff leaves in both water and air is an important question that can help us figure out how to best grow our food without hurting our ground, air, and water.
Our next speaker is Baird Langenbrunner, who will ask, what do computer worlds tell us about changes to rain and falling ice water in the state where this meeting is usually held?
All right, hello. My name is Baird, and today I want to talk about what you just heard about, so I'll just go forward. And these are the people and the friends that I've worked on this with. Okay, so why should we care about this? Food grows there. A lot of people live there. 39.25, 100. And a lot of other things are there that are worth watching out for. These will be affected by changes in rain and falling ice water in the future. So what part of the year is most important? Most storms happen during the winter. In a perfect winter, a lot of storms make a lot of mountain ice, and later, during the rest of the year when it's very dry, that ice heats up and gives a slow rush of fresh water to everything that needs it. Okay, so how can we look at the changes that come from human-caused warming in this time of year? To do that, we use computer worlds or computer earths, which I realize I can say. These are simple earths that we can run kind of like a game on a really big computer. These earths let air, land, and big water bodies speak to one another so that if we change one of them, the other parts can feel it too. And that's exactly what we do. To study how Earth will change because of human-caused warming, we add extra heat to the air of this computer and then look at how the rest changes. So how does rain and falling ice water change in this state by the year 2100? I'm going to play a fast movie that shows 36 different maps from 36 different computer Earths. So, ready, set, go. So red colors mean less rain, and blue colors mean more. The broken up line shows where there's no change, and I keep them on the picture to see all the guesses at once. As you can see, they don't agree very well at all. And I don't know about you, but when I look at something like this, it makes me feel like this. It makes me feel like all of this. So how will we ever get useful information from these kinds of guesses? Luckily, we have a good idea why they don't agree that well, and it has to do with high up winds in the air that act as storm paths and blow storms toward this state. When we look at how these winter winds change because of human-caused warming, some of the computer Earths guess the winds will get stronger and others guess the winds will get less strong. And to confuse us even more, some of them say the storm paths move up while others move down. So the silver lining here is that we can use the computer Earths that are best at making these winds and at making other things important to rain here, and then make a gooder guess. This is what we get. It will be a tiny bit wetter in the bottom half of the state and more wet as we go up. But that's not all. Beyond these normal winter changes, we also need to look at how things change year to year. In the past few years, this state got very dry and it was a little scary. Then last year, things got very wet thanks to a lot of storms, and a lot of trees and grasses grew thicker as a result. And since then, it got very hot and very dry again, and the state is now in the middle of a bad fire year. So, will these very dry to very wet snaps happen more often? So to figure that out, and the short answer is yes, but we used a single computer Earth and ran it for a lot more years, or something that someone else had done actually. But we use that information. And if we trust it enough, it tells us that this very dry to very wet pairing will happen more often in the future. The red show where it will happen more by the year 2100. Almost the whole state and left side of the country will feel these changes. And I don't have a lot of time here, but if you want to learn more about these changes or about how the wettest and driest winters will change in this state, go see this talk at the bottom in 3 days. So at the end of the day, how do these things change? The answer depends on the question we ask. Normal or mean winter will get a little bit wetter, we think, but looking at that alone hides other big important changes. Thank you.
Our next speaker, Denise Hills, will ask, is under the ground, under the big blue water, named for the land next to us, good for putting away bad air?
So, is under the ground, under the big blue water, named for the land next to us, good for putting away bad air? Bad air is not nice. Bad air can make the world less nice and really hot. People and other living things do not like it when the world is really hot and not nice. Places that make power can make a lot of bad air. But we can catch the bad air so it doesn't make the world less nice or too hot. But what can they do with the bad air once they catch it? Or after they catch it, sorry. Putting bad air under the ground in rocks can help the world be safe from hotter air and keep people happy. Some rocks have water that we can drink. These are not good for putting in bad air. Some rocks that have water that is not good to drink, but do not have other rocks on top of them to hold in the bad air. These rocks are also not good for putting away bad air. Some rocks can hold bad air in under the ground. Some rocks that can hold bad air in under the ground are found in a wide area and are very thick. Other rocks can stop bad air from coming up, but they're not as thick. But if you have lots of those rocks on top of each other, that will work to keep the bad air under the ground. Some rocks have water we can't drink and have other rocks on top of them to hold the bad air in under the ground. These rocks are good for putting in bad air in. We can put a lot of bad air into one rock, but it might go out very far. Sometimes it is better to put a little bit of bad air in many different rocks on top of each other. We try to put the bad air under the ground really far so that it will never come back up. We use these things above the ground to make the bad air take up less space, and then we can push it under the ground. We want to put bad air under the ground in places that have lots of good rocks for holding bad air. We want those places close to where a lot of bad air is made. We are here at the start right now. This is the big blue water named for the land next to us. A lot of bad air is made near the big blue water named for the land next to us. These points show where lots of bad air is made. So we are looking at the ground under the big blue water to see if the rocks will hold bad air for a very, 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 very long time. We are helping decide what good rocks are the best to put the bad air in with the best rocks on top of them to hold it in. This shows what the rocks under the big blue water named for the land next to us look like. We are trying to figure out which of these rocks might be good to put away bad air. So far, we know that these rocks all have water that we can't drink in them and that they can hold a lot of bad air. We know that these rocks here can hold the bad air in for a very, 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 very long time. That means that these rocks that are very, very deep are good for to put away bad air. We're not sure if these rocks can stop the bad air from coming back up for a very, very, very long time. That means we do not know if these rocks
that are not very, very deep are good for holding bad air. We need to learn more about them. We also need to learn more about the very, very, very deep rocks that are good for holding bad air to know how much bad air that they can hold and where that air might go. We can answer the question, is under the ground, under the big blue water, for the land next to us, good for putting away bad air? Yes. But we are still learning which ones will hold the most bad air for the longest time. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ryan Halpert, who will talk about the type of dog that came before dogs, eats different types of food during different times of the year, and we can tell by looking at their teeth very, very close up.
Hi, I'm Ryan, and none of my friends wanted to be on this talk. So. No idea why. All right, just in case you didn't know, these are what dogs are. There's a type of dog that came before there were dogs, but to tell this story, we're just going to call them dogs. These dogs were not liked much by people who have to take care of lots of four-legged animals that later become our food. So they killed all the dogs years ago. Years later, some people from a big park that doesn't have any soon-to-be food animals realized that this was a bad thing to have done. So they asked our friends from above us to send us some new dogs to put in our park. And because our friends are usually very nice, they said yes, and we got some new dogs. The new dogs really liked the park and did very well because it was full of food and not people with guns. The dogs even helped the park by making the food move around, which helped the trees grow better. So really a good day for everyone except the food animals, but they'd had it too good for too long. Here's my question. How much of the hard stuff that holds animals up from the inside do the dogs eat after they first eat all of the soft bits? As it turns out, teeth can help us tell that story if we look at them very, very close up. So close that we need glass like the kind you use to focus light to burn things, but even better than that, and also some computers. From up close, if the teeth look beat up, then we know that the dog ate lots of hard stuff. But if the teeth looks like a lot of lines, we know the dog ate more soft stuff. So we went to the park and we looked at the dogs who had died in the park, which is sad, but it happens, and it's good because they continue to help us learn about the dogs. We found that it didn't matter how old the dog was, which was kind of a surprise. We also found that it didn't matter what position the dog had in their pack, which was an even bigger surprise. But it did matter if the dog was a boy or a girl, and the boy dogs ate more hard stuff than the girl dogs, which we're still trying to figure out why. What mattered most was the time of year that the dog had died, which sort of makes sense. The time of year matches up to how much food is in the park. When it is cold, there is less food, so the dogs have to eat even more of the hard parts when they do catch food. But when it's warm, the animals they eat have babies, and those are easy to catch and eat, so more soft food for the dogs. The answer can help us know how to best take care of our new dog friends and make sure that everyone is happy that they're back. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Ryan. And now, Rolf Hutt will talk about the 5 times 10 things everyone should have in had in their hands before they are 10 and 2 years old.
Oh yeah, I said now for something completely different, and that is something that I'm allowed to say, which is surprising because it's also a movie by a bunch of old guys. Yeah? Yeah. And that's also one of the ways the computer talks is named after this bunch of old guys. And if you get that, you're in my group. Also, the people have been introducing themselves with their name. The last part of my name means little house. So I was going to introduce myself as Dr. House, but it seems that that name is taken by someone that is not even real. So, this is going to be short. You've been listening for a long while. So if I make this talk short, we'll be out of here before the other groups are out of the other room, so we can have drinks without a line. Okay, my talk. I make things. I like to make things. It's my job even to make things. I'm part of this group, but I'm also part of this group. Maybe you can see the name over there. That's important to me. In 3 days, I will present the latest thing I made in our show and tell moment. It's a show and tell moment on making things using gray sticking paper to fix stuff. Yeah, this. 3 days from now. It's the best show and tell moment of this too big meeting. Okay. But I like to make stuff. And the gray sticking paper brings me to the most important part of my talk. How did I become someone who makes things? How did I learn to make things? Well, I made a lot of things. And to make things, I need stuff to make things with. And if you can work with a lot of different things, a lot of different stuff to make things with, then you become one who makes. So I think it is important that kids get to work with a lot of stuff to make things, that they know how to use that stuff. And I think that is really, really important. And that's why my friend Astrid, this is Astrid, she is also someone who makes things. She made this group of the 5 times 10 things that kids should have had in their hands before they are 2 times 6 years old. Yeah, before they go to the big school. These 5 times 10 things should have been in their hands at some point. Okay? Things like this. And I brought a lot of them, so we're going to go through. We are going to go through them. Things like this that we use to hit other things with. Things like this that we use to turn little things into wood or into stone. Not like a wizard, by the way. Turn like. Things like this. Oh, there we go. Things like this to see how long things are. Oh. I have a little boy. He is 5 now. He uses this. He was measuring my wife. Then he was measuring the cool place we used to store food in. I was scared about my little boy. These are all classic stuffed things to make things with, but the list has more that I think is really important. Every kid should have worked with these things to fix clothes with. Or, even more important, these things to make the actual clothes with. It's and also, making things is not always with wood or with stone. It's also making food. So, things like this that you use to cut food with. Yeah? These are really important for kids. Oh yeah, this one. Play with this one. Because this is the thing to see if your lights are still working. By the way, you should be able to see if the lights are still working by looking at the lights. So if you have someone in your life and you say the light is broken, and they say, I'll pick up this, you say, no, it's broken, I can see it. And finally, this this little computer, yeah, that is connected to my computer, that makes the pictures go to the next picture every time I touch these. Ooh. So to end this, not all kids should become like me when they grow up. For one, that wouldn't be enough to drink. But still, I think, and Astrid thinks with me, that all kids should have had these things in their hands. When I was 2 times 7, I had to read a lot of books by this guy. Remember? The people that forced me to read this never thought that I might later use it in my work. And I didn't. Well, except... But still, I am happy that they made me read it. Because I grow older, and I look back happy because I'm now reading books that are harder than the books I used to read before, because they made me read this. And it's not part of my job. Not all school is because it becomes part of your job. So not only for kids that become like me, but also, maybe even more so, for kids that do not become like us. They should have had these things in their hands. When you walk out of here, you can grab one of these. Please do, and share them with the kids in your life. Shane has about 5 times 10 of these for you to take home. Thank you very much.